Good evening. It's 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, December 7th, 2021, and the regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order. For the record, I am Chairman Jason Welker, presiding in council chambers at Sandpoint City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street in Sandpoint, Idaho. Also present are Commissioners John Hastings, Kate Huisman via Zoom, Tom Riggs, Slate Camp, Forrest Shuck, and Mo is probably going to be here any minute. Before we start with the first agenda item, are there any announcements or general reports from the staff for commissioners? No? Okay. The first item tonight is the meeting minutes approval. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the November 16th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. There's no old business on the agenda this evening, so we'll move on to new business. The first item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing on a request for a conditional use permit, city application number PCU P21-0006, for approval to continue the existing use of the property at 1308 West Superior Street as an early learning center and preschool with childcare. The site is zoned residential multifamily, legally described as lots 10, 11, and 12, block 8 of International Edition of Sandpoint, according to the plat thereof, record in book 1 of plats at page 47, records of Bonner County, Idaho. A notice of public hearing was published in the Bonner Daily Bee, the city's newspaper of record, on November 16th. The order and procedure for the public hearing will be as follows: explanation of the subject of the public hearing by city staff, a presentation by the applicant. Please note that the commissioners should address their questions to the applicant at that time. We'll then open the public hearing, at which time the public may provide testimony. Questions should be asked of those testifying at that time. The order for those providing testimony will be as follows: in favor, neutral, and opposed. Next, the applicant will have the chance to rebut any of the public testimony, at which time final questions may be asked of the applicant. If there are any new facts elicited during rebuttal, the public will be given an opportunity to comment on any new facts. We'll then close the public hearing and the commission will deliberate. No new information may be provided after the hearing has been closed, with questions directed only to city staff during deliberation. Before we proceed any further, I would like to ask for confirmation from each of the commissioners that you have had no ex parte contact or conflict of interest as pertains to this request.
None here.
Forrest?
None.
None for myself?
None. None. None.
Okay.
None.
Okay. I will now yield the floor to Senior Planner Tess Cooper for an introduction of this request and an explanation of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Okay. This evening, we're here for a conditional use permit for, as discussed, the continuing use of a childcare at the property of 1308 West Superior. And just a refresher, the three options for the commission tonight is to approve condition with conditions, the conditional use permit, to deny the conditional use permit, or postpone the considerations of the application to consult with advisors and staff for a subsequent decision within 40 days after the hearing. A reminder of the conditional use approval criteria. Again, all 9 of these must be met in order to approve this project. Quickly review those. 1, this project will in fact constitute a conditional use as established on the official schedule of regulations for the zoning district involved. 2, will be harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives or with any specific objective of the comprehensive plan and or applicable sections of the Sandpoint Code. 3, will be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to be harmonious and appropriate with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use will not change the essential character of the same area. It will not be hazardous or disturbing to the existing neighboring uses. Will be served adequately by essential public services and utilities such as highways, streets, police, fire protection, drainage systems, refuge disposal, water, sewer, schools. And that the persons or agencies responsible for the establishment of the proposed use shall be able to provide adequate any such service or utility. 6, will not constitute excessive additional requirements at the public cost for public services and utilities and will not be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. 7, will not involve uses, activities, processes, materials, equipment, and conditions of operation that will be detrimental to any person's property or the general welfare by reasons of traffic, noise, smoke, fumes, glare, or odors. 8, will have vehicular approaches to the property which shall be designed so as not to create and interfere with traffic on surrounding public roads. And 9, will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of natural, scenic, or historic features of major importance. The CUP 2106 for the West Superior Daycare. The applicant is Tana Vanderholm. Landowner is Pleiades Enterprises, LLC. The proposed use is early learning center with before and after school care for children and infants up to 12 years of age. The zone is residential multifamily, and the location is 1308 West Superior Street. And again, the conditional use permit discussion tonight is for approval of the continuance of the existing use. Site history. The property was previously used as a daycare facility and conditionally permitted under CUP 7712 to Fred and Berta Bjordstrom. Most recently filed and brought up to date by this office on February 4th of 1980. The pre-application for this project was held on October 20th. The application was received on October 27th, and the application was determined complete on November 10th. The notice of hearing was published on November 16th for this project. Vicinity map and overview of the project site. The existing site plan and proposed site plan is in and of it the same. They are not proposing any modifications to the site or structures on the property. They just plan to continue use of the site as is. There are 2 buildings. It's a little hard to see here. 2 buildings with, looks like 3 classrooms, and this building, the second building has 2 rooms. Configuration of classrooms and office space and so forth. Parking is along the right of way here along Elliott Street with employee parking in the back. Storybook Early Learning Centers is an already operating company with multiple preschool locations, and they are hoping to add this location. Staff has deemed the application complete and that it contains all of the requirements listed in Code Title 9, Chapter 9, Section 6A3. It was deemed complete on November 10th. The required public hearings have been provided in the packet, and the required narrative was provided by the applicant to address all of the 9 listed criteria. The site's comprehensive plan designation is context area 3, which talks about development pattern to increase density of housing through smaller lot sizes, smaller setbacks, and options for shared open space, and the inclusion of attached and detached multifamily units. A traditional street and grid pattern, sidewalks, walkability, proximity to services exemplified by many of Sandpoint's traditional neighborhoods. The property is zoned residential multifamily. And the purpose of the residential multifamily zoning district is an area zoned as residential multifamily and intended to preserve land for housing and to provide diversity in housing options. This zone implements the comprehensive plan policies for those areas identified as CA3 in the 2009 comprehensive plan. As you can see in the use table, under that chapter, daycare facilities are listed as a conditional use in this zone for facilities holding 13 students or greater. The code suggests 7 possible draft conditions to limit the impact of this use, this conditional use, on the neighboring community. Staff has devised suggested conditions of approval in the staff report on page 12. We are welcome to go through those in detail if the commission chooses to do so at this time.
I think we've all had the chance to preview those. Are there any questions about those conditions?
Not about the conditions. No.
Are you done with your report, your presentation, Tess?
Just going over the additional, public hearing procedures.
Any questions for Tess at this time before we start the public hearing?
I do.
Yeah.
If this was previously permitted for, sounds like a similar use, why is a new CUP required at this point?
A very good question. The original CUP was back in 1977 and 1980, before there was a robust review and conditional requirements. And so there are no specifications of parking size, limitations, students, nothing descriptive whatsoever in the permit approval and conditions in the past. The property has recently changed hands. So with the change of ownership triggers the renewal of or a new conditional use permit. And because there wasn't enough in the previous one, staff and legal counsel has determined that going through the process for the new ownership for conditional use permit would be required.
Okay. I do have one question about one of the conditions. One of the conditions provided that another new CUP would be required if there's a change in use, which I understand, or if a building permit is issued. I thought, really? If they go in and punch a new window in, that requires a building permit. You would have to get a new CUP?
If there was modifications to the structure that would change the scope of the use. So if we were adding to the building that would require and trigger new parking requirements, it would be required to come up to standards with modification or expansion of the use or the structures. And so that would then require a review and potentially a revision to the existing conditional use permit, not necessarily a whole new process for a whole new permit.
Well, right now the condition flatly says upon issuance of a new CUP or a building permit, a new CUP is required. So if that's not the case, it seems to me like that language needs to be modified to specify exactly what we mean.
We are happy to discuss how we should revise that to make it more clear, if you feel that would be an important part of this.
I do.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Any other questions for Tess before we open the public hearing? Okay. Here's the public hearing procedure. I think we've gone over that already. So we will open the public hearing. And we'll start with anybody who would like to, sorry, here we go.
The applicant first.
No, sorry, we need to hear the applicant. I'm sorry, I lost the agenda here, the schedule. Okay, we will now prepare, no, that's not on the agenda, sorry.
Bottom of page 2.
Bottom of page 2. Okay, sorry, next will be the applicant's presentation. As a reminder, commissioners should address their questions to the applicant at this time. And I believe the applicant's joining us via Zoom, is that correct?
That's correct, I'm here.
Okay, thanks. You may begin. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. I'm Tana Vanderholm. My husband and I, like was previously stated before, we own multiple early learning facilities serving ages 4 weeks through 12 years. We built and have operated a facility in Old Town and currently are. And then we also are operating a facility that's in the Bonner Mall currently. And then we just purchased this property for the intent of also operating a early learning facility ages 4 weeks through 12 years. We do feel it's very important to have quality options for childcare and early learning opportunities for children in our community at this age in order to transition them easier into the public school district or into homeschooling or whatever the family chooses to do, but helping children develop those social skills and emotional skills is highly important, and many studies have been done proving that it is very beneficial to the community to be able to offer those services and provide those.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Tana?
I guess just a little bit about us personally. My husband and I have raised 8 children. Several of our daughters are degreed in early childhood education and works in the facility. We are also participants in the CACFP or the USDA food program. So the meals that we provide and serve to the children in the facility are free at no cost because we receive reimbursement from those from the state of Idaho. We are a steps to quality facility. So that means that we welcome and participate in a higher standard of environment, higher standard of education for our employees, higher standard of quality of materials that are in the classrooms, and assessments of the children. And we really truly love that program. It makes us a better facility, and it's better for the all around families that we serve. We would love the opportunity to be able to serve Sandpoint with a quality facility.
Are there any questions for Tana? Tana, do you have any plans to make any immediate improvements or changes to the building that would require a building permit?
Well, the gentleman that just raised the question about putting in a window, we are hoping it's not going to require a permit, a building permit, but we would like to put in a doorway on the end of the building that's on Elliott Street so that we can provide a safe in and out way for parents that is secured, so that anybody who has access to children is required to have a code, and then they electronically check in. So not just anybody can come onto the premises and have access to children. and the best way we can figure to do that would be to put a door in the end of the building. But other than that, no, we're going to leave the buildings the way they are. The classrooms are set up nicely already with the bathrooms in them. The only things that we're doing is putting in a proper heating and cooling system with the sanitization system that goes with that. And then we're doing the flooring, redoing the flooring. Taking out the old carpet and putting in some water resistant flooring for better wear. And then we're just doing a little bit of work in the kitchen just to update the kitchen because the building is quite old with new appliances and stuff. And other than that, that's all we intended to do at this point in time.
Okay.
Our goal is to get up and operating as quickly as possible. We've already got an interest of 4 families, I believe, that are waiting and ready to enroll with us as soon as we are licensed and ready to move.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, John.
What is the capacity right now, and is that going to in any way change? Do you see that changing soon?
The capacity will be determined by the fire marshal. That's the way they do it in the state of Idaho. We easily see probably a capacity of 85, maybe close to, we'll be keeping it under 100, but I don't see any problem with getting our to be able to be licensed for up to 99.
And is that what the current license is? Or the
it's not currently licensed,
right,
and I don't have any idea what the previous owners were licensed for. I don't know.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So the facility is not functioning now, and if that is the case, how long has it not been functioning?
June. I believe he closed it down in June. We purchased it in July and just got to work. So we anticipate that if we can be issued our conditional use permit, that we'll be finished up with our little bits of work that we're doing in there. And then we're hoping to be able to be licensed by the state, by health and welfare, we were hoping for the 1st of January. We might be looking closer to the middle of January.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I offer some additional clarification on the next steps and process when it comes to licensing? I think the applicant has articulated it really well, as did Tess. But just to help weigh in regarding a conditional use permit and the need for it to be amended, the condition reads related to building permits that any future change of use and or work requiring a building permit shall require an amended conditional use permit application. It doesn't necessarily say that it's needed for an actual permit. And then it says building permits obtained for the sole purpose of improving accessibility are exempt from this requirement. So things like the doors, replacing a window, the flooring, none of those sorts of improvements would trigger a building permit. We are most certainly trying to be reasonable and not burden the applicant with process. However, the next step is actually to do a use inspection. So our building official, before we're able to issue a business license for this to be in operation, has to go and do a detailed inspection of the facility. Part of that process may require a building permit, so long as it's improving the accessibility and things like that. It is not warranted to come forward with a conditional use permit. The reason this condition is put in is very much to the point that you asked regarding the number of children and employees, frankly, right? If the one business owner maybe has 10 students and a new business owner has 200 students, it may be warranted to review an application for potential additional impacts that weren't in existence with the prior owner. So that's why we go through this process of renewing it. But it certainly wasn't intended to be an additional burden.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Okay. Thank you, Tana. We will now prepare to proceed with the public hearing. For the record, all written comments received in time have either been included in the meeting packet or otherwise provided to the commissioners. Please note that the public hearing is for comments only. Do not address any questions to the commissioners or to staff. Commissioners, if you have questions for the person testifying, you should ask those questions at the time of their testimony. Is there anybody participating via Zoom, Melissa?
Mr. Chairman, there was one member of the public participating by Zoom.
Did that person wish to speak?
I'm not aware that he does, no.
Okay, then I will skip over all of the Zoom protocols. For those attendants here in the chambers, if you would like to speak, you will need to complete a sign-up form available on the table by the door and hand it to the clerk. Please state on your form whether you wish to speak in favor or neutral or are in opposition to this request. Do not approach the dais. If you have any materials for the commissioners, please hand them to the clerk. Okay. In the interest of time, please do not repeat prior comments made by others, but simply state your support for those comments. Each speaker will have 3 minutes and the public hearing is now open. Is there anybody on Zoom or in the chambers who wishes to speak in favor of this CUP application? Did anybody give you a slip, Melissa?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anybody who would like to testify who is neutral? Anybody who would like to testify who is opposed? Okay, I'm seeing that most people are here for the next agenda item. So with that, are there any other, well, there's no one to ask questions of, so we will close the public hearing. And we can now move on to deliberation. So we have a CUP for a new daycare facility on the site of an existing daycare facility that's been closed for 6 months. Would anybody like to comment before we hear a motion?
I think it's continues to be an excellent use that meets an acute need. I hadn't realized that it would accommodate up to 99 children. And my only concern about that is traffic in a residential neighborhood at times when children are being dropped off and picked up. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I'm wondering how that's going to work.
Does this sort of CUP require any sort of traffic impact study like a multifamily development, Amanda? No? Okay.
I know when I was looking over the materials prior, it kind of looked like our function is this a suitable use of this property? And many of those details are things that would be worked out with city staff and state licensing organizations and building inspectors, et cetera. And that our function is pretty much to see, is this an acceptable use of this property?
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners?
Excuse me. I believe in about the early 80s, so it was right after this 1980 conditional use. I was a small person that went to this facility for can't remember how long. Probably yourself. But I remember having a pretty good time there, and yeah, I don't have any issues. This is a very long running use of this facility. So, I mean, frankly, I was a little surprised that it would hold that many people too, but I know it is a strong demand in the community for, you know, places for kids to hang out. So yeah, I'm in favor.
I think part of it too, it's not that many children.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the capacity that, I mean, and in a facility like this, you have a pretty high employee to student ratio as well, I would think. So that's also counting employees. But
that's true. Good point.
Are the commissioners okay with the proposed condition number 1 about that Tom brought up about the need to amend the CUP if a building permit is required beyond improvements to accessibility?
Well, when I raised the question, Tess, I think you qualified it with some language that I recall exactly what you said as to a conditional use permit involving a substantial change in use or something like that. I forget exactly how you phrased it, but it's still as currently worded. It says a future change of use and or work requiring a building permit. I still read that as saying, if you go in and pull a building permit, the city has a right to require a new CUP.
Application, sir. It says application, sorry to interrupt you, but it doesn't say a new permit, it says a new permit application.
Well,
can you explain the difference between those?
I would be glad to. So if we received an application, and this goes back to the expansion of the facility, for example, based upon how many individuals are occupying it, the building code requires that there's 35 square feet per individual that's occupying the facility. So if they were to add, let's say, 4 feet of an addition onto the facility, and that required a building permit, and 4 feet was kind of a small number, but let's say it's 20 feet, right? And now all of a sudden we can have 20 more children in this facility, and it's a development in that regard. It would actually require a traffic study, right? Anytime you're expanding the footprint of the facility, you now have to meet parking requirements. You now have to meet the traffic demand analysis. So there's really a lot more that goes into it. However, if the application that was submitted said, we're just replacing, we're making our windows bigger, right? Staff has the ability and flexibility to say, thank you for the application. You do not need an amended permit because you're consistent with the application that we've already processed.
well, that's great, but I don't know how an applicant's supposed to know whether a new CUP is required or not until they come in and talk to you. And I don't see that the criteria are set forth in the condition. Just as a matter of sort of regular procedure, I think it's helpful if the condition says a building permit that leads to what? The expansion of square footage, some qualifying language.
I think the language test use that you may be recalling is a change in scope.
That would be fine. That would make sense. So it would read, for example, and or work requiring a building permit that would lead to a change in scope of the permit, something of that nature.
Change in scope of the operation?
Of the operation. I'm looking for help.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable.
Well, I would suggest that.
That seems clear to me. Yeah.
It makes sense to me, Tom.
Can we?
Oh,
Doing it
right up there
as we speak.
Did you write that down?
She's putting it right in the condition.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Great.
I did write it down, but yeah.
Are commissioners pleased with the amended condition?
Very well.
As seen on
I'm good with that.
Okay. Any other questions about the conditions of this application? If not, then would anybody like to make a motion to approve?
We gotta find the language.
well, I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the noted change in the condition number 1.
Okay.
Now I don't have, let's see, do I have the actual, here we go. I move the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission, after consideration of the criteria and relevant standards of the Idaho Code and Sandpoint City Code, approve the request by Pallades Enterprises LLC for conditional use permit to continue the existing use of the property as an early learning center and preschool with childcare at the property located 1309 West Superior Street, subject to the following conditions as set forth in the staff report with the modification that was just discussed here. Based on evidence, records, testimony, and the reasons for approving this request are: 1, staff has followed the applicable notice procedures. The proposed use is listed in the Sandpoint Code as a conditional use. The proposed use is not in conflict with the comp plan, and a conditional use permit application and associated fees have been submitted containing the requirements of city code and has demonstrated compliance with all 9 criteria for a CUP as outlined in the code.
I'd second that.
Okay, Mo, this will be a roll call vote.
Mr.
Clerk?
Chairman,
Yes.
one point of clarification. Commissioner Riggs, the script identifies 1309 West Superior. It is actually, I believe, 1308 West Superior. I think it's just a typo.
Okay.
Okay.
No need to read that again. I don't
No.
believe. Okay. We'll do a roll call vote then, Melissa.
Commissioner Huseman,
Aye.
Commissioner Riggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Shuck,
Aye.
Commissioner Camp,
Aye.
Commissioner Hastings,
Aye.
Commissioner Welker,
Aye.
Commissioner Dunkel.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. And we will move on to the next agenda item. The final item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing on a request for approval of a 13-unit multifamily development. The site is comprised of 4 parcels located at 624, 626, and 628 North Lincoln Avenue and 1809 Main Street and zoned residential multifamily. A notice of public hearing was published in the Bonner County Daily Bee, the city's newspaper of record, on November 16th. The order and procedure for the public hearing will be the same as recited earlier. At this time, I'll ask each commissioner that you have had no ex parte contact or conflict of interest as pertains to this request. Tom?
None.
Forrest?
None.
John?
None.
Slade?
No.
Mo?
No.
Kate? No. Okay, I myself have. I'm personal friends with some of the individuals who are opposing this development, and for that reason, I've decided to recuse myself tonight from the deliberations, and I will be handing this over to our vice chair, John Hastings. So, John, please take the script, and the meeting is yours. I'll be stepping down. Thank you, guys.
So the order for the procedure for the public hearing will be as recited earlier. Again, I will ask for confirmation, please, from each commissioner. We're beyond that point. So I will now yield the floor to our senior planner, Tess Cooper, for an introduction of this request and an explanation of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We are discussing a second conditional use permit this evening for Lincoln and Maine multifamily development. Again, the 3 options for you to decide on are approve with conditions the conditional use permit, deny the conditional use permit, and postpone consideration to a later date. We should all have these fresh in our mind. I'm happy to read through them one more time if we need a reminder, but I think everybody doesn't need my dry, boring reading again, but we can go over them at the end and during the discussion where it's more applicable if we need to. They're at the end of the presentation as well. CUP 21-0004 Lincoln and Maine multifamily. The applicant is ZPD Lincoln LLC. The landowner is ZPD Lincoln LLC. The proposed use is a 13-unit multifamily development. The zone is residential multifamily. The location is 624, 626, 628 North Lincoln and 1809 Main Street with the respective assessor's parcel numbers. Again, 2104 is approval of 13-unit multifamily. The site history, 624, 626, and 628 North Lincoln were recently platted in 2004 as Zenner's Addition, but is a non-conformance as the 2 lots do not have frontage on a public right-of-way. The proposal will require a new boundary line adjustment or short plat to combine all of the lots into either 1 or 2, which the applicants are aware of. A pre-application meeting was held on September 1st. The application was submitted on October 8th and deemed complete by staff on 11/12 and published in the newspaper on November 16th. And a view of the vicinity map and site for your reference. And the proposed site plan with 3 buildings that equate to the 13 units. Quick rendition of Ohati townhomes. Again, as discussed previously, townhomes is just the design. These will not be individually owned traditional townhomes, but they will be multi-family rental apartments. More visuals of what the development is proposed to look like. Staff analysis. They determined that the applicant has provided an application containing the requirements in City Code, Title 9, Chapter 9, Section 6A3. City staff issued a completeness letter to the applicants on November 12th. The required public hearing postings have been provided and are included in your packet. The required narrative was provided and addressed the above listed approval criteria 1 through 9. The project site comprises 2 separate comprehensive planned land use future land use designations. Context areas 2 and context areas 3. Context area 2 is described as the low density development pattern located in the city, characterized by Sandpoint's historic single family neighborhoods set on a traditional street grid with small accessory dwelling units, an urban forest, active alleys, on-street and alley parking, walkable streets, and a variety of housing types intermixed on the same street. Context area 3 is described as development patterns that increase the density of housing through the use of smaller lot sizes, smaller setbacks, and options for shared open space, and the inclusion of attached and detached multifamily units. Zoning map. The zoning designation for these properties is residential multifamily. And the description of residential multifamily, again, is intended to preserve land for housing and to provide diversity in housing options. This zone implements the comprehensive plan policies for those areas identified as CA3 in the 2009 comprehensive plan. And the use table listed in this section of code says that multifamily dwellings are permitted up to 7 units. Anything over 8 units, anything 8 units or more, it constitutes a conditional use. It requires a conditional use permit. And there was some discussion. It's a very complicated site, so we just wanted to give you a little visual of the configuration of this lot with setbacks, side setbacks, and requirements. So you can see front setbacks from both street accesses, 15 feet. Side yard setbacks are 5 feet. Driveways, streets, or parking don't necessarily equate to required setbacks. Only structures are required in this zoning designation to meet setback requirements. And staff has, because of some concerns raised in the proximity of these buildings to the side yard, because the lot configuration is very non-traditional, staff has suggested a condition to increase the setback, because there really is no rear setback in this configuration for the rear of the buildings to meet that 15-foot requirement, and has been discussed with the applicants. We have some additional site plans and renderings during his presentation for you to look at what that might look like. An additional discussion both in this site and the staff report and in some concerns from the neighbors is neighborhood scale. And we've come up against this in the past and had discussions about step up for stories. And this is just a quick view of the neighborhood scale for you. The three structures in the corner of this area are all 1 story. We have a 1.5 story next door, a 2-story to the south.
Is that question marked by the 1.5 because it's
one of the, yeah, so it was hard to determine exactly, without being in there,
Gotcha.
snooping on Google Maps, what it actually constitutes. And potentially that neighbor is here and could lend us. Again, we have done a very thorough analysis in the staff report for you on the code requirements and the suggested code conditions of approval have been included. We're happy to go through those or discuss any concerns that you have with any particular one at this time, if you would like to.
John, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure I've totally followed you on the side yard, rear yard setbacks. Are you're suggesting that on the north boundary of the portion of the project fronting on Lincoln, that would require a consistent 15-foot setback?
That's a front yard street setback for 15, correct, along Lincoln.
What about where it, on the north side of the project where these buildings back up to the 3 residences that are on Main and Lincoln?
That constitutes what we consider a side yard setback. It's a shared setback with a neighboring parcel or a shared property line with a neighboring parcel. So that constitutes what we consider a side yard setback. And code prescribes it as 5 feet. Concern has been with the intensity of these buildings compared to the neighboring parcels, such a close, to follow that required 5 yard setback would be potentially a greater impact than if it were, because the rear of the buildings generally constitutes facing the rear yard and has a greater setback of at least 15 feet. That we're suggesting that we apply it as if it were a rear setback instead of a side yard setback in this instance.
So plans are being drawn to make that a 15 instead of 5.
That discussion has been happening, has had occurred with the applicant, and you can certainly speak more with him about that. There is room to shorten the driveways. They proposed longer driveways than required for our parking dimensions. And so there is room to shorten those, which would allow the relocation of the buildings further south and away from that property line.
Okay, thanks. I understand that then. So that would apply to the 8 units that are in the portion of the L that fronts onto Lincoln. That would not apply to the side yard setback on the north side portion of the L that runs up to Main Street.
Correct. And most certain this central building that is with the little jog in the property line that is much closer to the property line than the other 2.
Okay.
And it is condition 1 that says that 15-foot setback would be implemented there.
I believe so. I can refer to that.
Tess, do you have more in your presentation? Or?
I do not believe I do.
Do any commissioners have additional questions for staff?
One question on the, if this was just a single family home going in, would they be required to do this 15-foot change?
They would not.
So why is there a 15-foot then?
To mitigate the intensity of the potential use.
So is that just like a concession, or is there something like code that says to do that?
Code would not require it. Correct. It's a concession. It's a mitigation to basically be a more friendly neighbor.
So would the property north be amiable to doing the same thing? I'm just curious because it seems like they're giving up something to lose driveway space, which is probably minimal anyway. I kind of see it as like a safety thing with the new street being put in too. Right, that's all I got.
Just for a point of clarification, you said property to the north. Are you talking about a property that's not subject to this application?
Yeah.
Just a reminder that property is not subject to this application.
Exactly. Thank you.
I have a question too. What is in city code now as opposed, I mean, the driveway, which looks awfully road-like, but is not a road. How is that addressed in city code as stands, and how does that relate to this application?
That's a really good question. It is just a private driveway, so there are not traffic in our traffic plan specifications for intersection widths and so forth. Just fire width for safety. Mm-hmm. I know Amanda was prepared to talk a little bit more about that if more detailed questions came up. So do you want to add?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you, Tess. I think a simple way to think of it is a street serves more than one parcel. In this case, the entire access is on a single parcel, and it is therefore privately owned. So,
well, is it currently a single parcel, or that's part of the
No, that would be part of the requirement. This development.
Gotcha.
Consolidating the lots.
Yeah. Any other questions, commissioners?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Was that no? Okay. So next will be the applicant's presentation. As a reminder, commissioners, you should address your questions to the applicants at this time. Was the applicant prepared to speak?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is William Friedman. This is my wife, Kathy.
Hello.
And this is Matt Kerr, our architect. You know, Kathy and I have lived and operated businesses in our community for more than 2 decades. We live in Sandpoint and currently own and operate 2 downtown businesses. You know, first I'd like to thank my amazing wife, Kathy, because she has always been there for our family and especially our community. And we wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for Kathy and her dreams. I'd also like to extend my deep gratitude and special thanks to our team, which many of our team are here tonight, which we are very proud of and really truly represent the incredible spirit and talent of our local community. On behalf of our entire team, I'd also like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the City of Sandpoint staff. They've been so wonderful. Their professional and supportive nature has created a wonderful working environment for shared ideas on this important project. Our collective dream of expanding housing opportunities through this and other important projects highlight your dedication, your skill, and your carefully planned Sandpoint growth. Kathy and I have been blessed to live, work, and participate in this community where we raised our children and now our grandchildren in the peace and tranquil lifestyle Sandpoint provides. Our goal has always been to make a difference by returning to our community our profits and our time. Through cooperation and careful planning, our goal is always to limit the community impacts. And as we begin the next chapter in moving Sandpoint forward, we humbly realize that together we can accomplish more than we ever could alone. We ask for your careful consideration, continued support of this project. Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Matt Kerr with Sailor Owens Kerr Design Studio, architect on record for the project. This evening, we're here to request your approval to increase the number of units from 7 to 13. I think we're all aware of the housing pressure that Sandpoint is under at this time. We are truly hoping to serve that purpose to increase housing availability within city boundaries. The reason we're asking for this increase is also to keep these units affordable. We started with 20, and in working with city staff, learning more and more about the fire lane, life safety, etc. We finally were able to work in 13 units, which keeps the houses or the units affordable. It offers a product that we can build. And so we think 13 is a reasonable number that also maintains light, air, safety, open area. And we're able to accommodate snow storage, garbage, all city services within the lot and not, overflow into the neighborhood. I think the product looks darn good myself. I hope you guys agree. And we are available for questions at this time, I suppose.
Commissioners? Yeah.
I have a question. You made a reference to going from 7 units to 13. What's the 7 unit reference?
7 units are what's permitted for a lot for multifamily currently, but it said that we could apply for a conditional use to have more units.
Okay.
If they were applying for 7, they wouldn't be here.
I got you. Okay.
They would be building.
I have a question, John. Matt, can you tell us the approximate size or square footage of these?
Absolutely. They range between 13 to 1,800 square feet. The north-south units are a little bit smaller. When we put the 26-foot fire access lane in, we had to redraw, make those a little bit smaller.
So the 26-foot access meets all of Sandpoint city requirements.
Correct.
These multiple bedroom units?
They are, yes.
Okay.
Three bedroom.
Yeah, 3 bedroom, 2 bath. We're aiming for family housing.
The 13 and the 18s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all 3 bedrooms.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant?
Is this driveway, is it one way or is it two way?
Two way.
Do you have a ballpark price range that the rent will be?
Well, we're trying to say 25 to 30% under market right now. And market, unfortunately, is in the $3,000 range for 3-bedroom homes.
And why do you want to rent them at under market rate?
My experience in this community as a business owner, having employees, etc., I'm confronted with it on a daily basis as to what rates are and what affordability is. There's a really severe need in Sandpoint right now for people to be able to have housing, whether it's housing they're trying to purchase or housing that they're trying to rent. What market isn't necessarily what people can afford based on the wage values and everything else that are going on. So my goal is to create housing that people can afford, not just what market rate is and et cetera. And for family housing, we have a shortage of housing that allows families to live. So that's my goal, is to set out and create housing for people that they can afford in the current market.
How much space is there between the driveway and the south property line? Is it right on? Is it?
I apologize. Could you repeat that, Mo? I'm sorry.
How much space is there between the driveway and the south property line?
15 feet.
15?
I assume that was going to be our rear yard setback, and so we designed per that. That also gives us someplace to put snow.
Can we see the property illustration again so we can just zero in on what Mose is asking?
Not this one.
Yeah, the
So
overhead.
Amanda's driving. Do you want me to put it up?
Okay.
The applicant has amended some of their exhibits, so now would be the time to show those if you're okay with that.
Yep.
The same image that you were looking for.
Are dated.
This one on the screen, in conversation with city staff, like to see more windows on the street facing facades. So we added windows to those plans that face the street.
And while you're trying to get that up, what was, I noticed in the staff report, there was some concern about the carports and how they would need to be adjusted. What was?
I had, we had screening walls. They weren't solid. They were just like planks of wood separating the units. And it was felt that those were more of an enclosure, which the fire code doesn't allow. Can't egress through an enclosure. So we eliminated the screening walls.
There you go, Mose. Okay. It was there.
Nice tree.
I thought it was a snowflake.
So this is the new?
Correct.
Okay. And the question was on the driveway to the south.
Oh, the driveway. The curb of the drive is 5 feet from the property line.
Okay, there we go.
The furthest south unit, those ones on the right, is 15 feet from there.
All right.
It's actually a little bit more.
And the quad in the middle there, what's the setback from their rear end to the adjacent property?
Can you say that one more time, John?
The quad, yeah, the four in the middle there, it appears that that setback to the existing property is not 15 feet as it is.
Correct. It's 5 feet. And that may have been a misunderstanding on my part. In discussion with city staff, we were discussing how the IBC likes to, as the building goes up, you want to step back from the property line to provide a little more air and space. We had the opportunity to do that on the left-hand 4 block. We were further north, so we had the availability to move those back and create some more space. We don't have that ability on the right-hand 4 block. And unfortunately, if we were to have a 15-foot setback there, we would completely eliminate the carport and any off-street parking. And that would be bad for the project.
So staff, for your clarification, the 5-foot setback right now, we're calling that the side, which that design meets code.
But condition number 1 would make all of those buildings have a 15-foot setback.
As currently drafted, it would
As currently drafted.
the north property line. So yes, those 4 units.
Those 8 units.
Those 8 units. Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
4 of them already have.
Yes, yes.
So yes.
Okay, so we're clear.
So the black bolded line on the side of the illustration is the property line where it jogs down and over.
Correct.
Okay.
So those 4 that are set back only 5 feet at the moment, if we end up requiring a 15-foot setback, will you make those 4 units smaller? Take away the carports? What is your plan there, if any, at this point?
At this moment, I don't have a very good answer. Unfortunately, this is a kind of a last minute thing for me. I would need to talk with the Friedmans to provide a good solution.
Yeah, it would really reduce the scope of the project considerably. And yeah, I'm not sure how that might work.
You didn't have to
Not well.
reduce bedrooms or, make them smaller units.
One corollary that kind of goes along with that, I think, is when we referred to the carports as off-street parking, actually, they could park anywhere on this driveway and be off-street parking, correct? Because it's not a street. And that would probably be something that management would have to regulate as far as, are your tenants going to be parking in the driveway?
Do you know how that affects fire code?
Yeah.
As far as access?
I think it's semantics is, John is correct. I mean, the whole entire thing is a parking facility. Those are not off-street parking. Those are considered parking spaces in a facility complex. You had mentioned the step back though. Wasn't that a solution that you got looked at with those 4 units? So the second story being step backs.
No, we were just specifically referring to those 4 along the left hand. Yeah, thank you. We had the availability to move those.
So clarify for me again, who's asking for this property to be extended or this modification to be made so there can be a 15-foot setback when the 5 meets the code? Who's asking for that?
So that was city staff working on proposed conditions as a result of analyzing the various comments received and the project overall and the intent of a rear setback. So it is certainly within the commission's purview to modify these conditions. These are just proposed conditions.
And the 5 units to the, all these maps should have a directional arrow.
Yeah, it's a little confusing.
But the 5 units, that's the east side, correct? If
Correct.
I'm getting my north, yes, I think so, on the east side. That appears to be like it. Is that a 5-foot setback between whatever's on the other side of that on that one?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And I would assume that by the drawing, if it is somewhat to scale, that those 5 are the larger square footage ones.
Yes.
And that 5 feet is correct as well.
Correct.
Is that the side or the back?
You want to jump in, Tess?
It's confusing. That's for sure.
It's a side yard setback.
It's the side.
It's being treated, it is the side and being treated as a side yard setback.
Okay. Thank you.
Do commissioners have any additional questions for applicants before we begin the public hearing?
Not I.
No.
I don't.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now prepare to proceed with the public hearing. Again, for the record, all written comments received in time have either been included with the meeting packet or otherwise provided to the commissioners. Please note that the rules and procedure for this public hearing will be the same as recited earlier. As a reminder, comments shall not be personally derogatory, nor shall they be personally directed at any individual, organization, or business. Each speaker will be allowed to 3 minutes. But please, in the interest of time, do not repeat comments already made by prior speakers, but simply state your support for those comments. Do we have Zoom people participating tonight?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to testify in favor of this proposal? Anybody online in favor?
No.
Is there anyone here who would like to testify as neutral? Anyone online? Is there anyone here who would like to testify who is opposed?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do have some sign-up sheets that were provided.
Okay.
Taylor Bradish.
Can I have the site plan up before I begin?
The one that was just up there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, is that okay to have the site plan up? Well, my name is Taylor Bradish, and I live about 5 blocks to the east. And I'm going to start backwards on my presentation because I want to get through it in 3 minutes. So I'm going to try my best. The biggest issue I have with this comes from the staff report. I read the staff report and I find it very misleading. And I know you guys use that information to make your decision. So first, I wanted to talk about the combining lots as it talks about in the staff report. That's a street. If it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it's a duck. That's a street. And what that is called is a double frontage street lot with a double frontage street. Well, that is not allowed in our code. You know, the code isn't your code. It's not the planning department code. It's our code. And that's not allowed. Private streets are not allowed. This is being called a private street with city services. Let's not get into that kind of situation where we're going to say something is a private street, but offer city services. A physical design constraint is not an excuse to call a street not a street. And then in the code as well, it talks about dimensions of lots, and a lot that is created shall be sufficiently wide and deep to permit full conformity with zoning regulations. What that means, you're talking about the front and the side yard setback. It's kind of generally accepted that the rear yard is opposite of the front door. So this lot would have 2 rear, one to the north by the houses and one to the east. And by our code, that's a 15-foot setback. And on our code as well, it says there shall be a rear yard. So the staff just calling all the internal lots side yards is inappropriate, because the word shall means shall. It's not should, might, maybe. And then also on the staff report, it talks about administratively approving the lot line adjustments. I have a big issue with that because in the bottom left, that's the CA2, which is the most low dense portion of the city on the comprehensive map. The comprehensive map cannot be changed administratively. Idaho Code 67-6511 requires a public hearing through your board and the city council in order to change the comprehensive plan designation map. So a administrative change in this instance is incorrect.
Mr. Chairman, that's 3 minutes. Time is up.
Can I have somebody donate me their 3 minutes? Is that allowed?
I don't know.
Are they personally
I don't believe
and
so.
are they affected party?
Would anybody like to donate? You?
State your name and your location of residence.
Sure. James Nixon.
Okay, he can have his 3 minutes.
Okay, I will take it quick. Also in the staff report, it talks about adjacent not having a definition. In the Webster Dictionary, adjacent means adjoining. That would apply to those houses on the property to the north, which are both 1-story homes. Those are not 1.5-story homes. Those are not 2-story homes. So that would be the appropriate basis to set the height on those. I encourage you guys to not even consider the word low income, income diversity, or any of those terms that are buzzwords that pull on your heartstrings, because in our code, it says, if you want to have income diversity, you will put a deed restriction on your property that says it will lock the rent to incomes at 80% or less of median income as defined by code. Otherwise, this should not apply. The only way to make that go through the process to have income diversity is put a deed restriction on this project. The CA2 is a low density comprehensive plan. This lot cluster together is 55.3% in the CA2. It's a majority in a zoning that this project is not appropriate for. The policy A, which is stated under resource conservation, it encourages increased density in CA3 and CA4. Those 3 lots are CA2. It does not apply to this project. A portion was left out of the Stout report in the designation C2, which consists of the following. Individual structures should respect the scale and character of the built environment, saying the houses that are already there should be respected. Environment with the bulk, mass, and architecture of the new structures being harmonious with existing residents in the vicinity. This is not harmonious, not one bit. The goal LU-1, effective land use, policy A, encourage increased density in CA3. Great, that's okay. The lot on the right is CA3. More than 1/2 of this project and 8 of the 13 units, or 62% of the units, do not fit the goal which are listed in CA2 in the comprehensive plan. So there's the 4 requirements that you have to meet for the conditional use permit, and one of them is that it meets the comprehensive plan. This project does not meet the comprehensive plan in any way that you look at it. Goal LU-2, traditional patterns, policy C. These are 4 lots, are a total of 49,658 feet. Based on the policy of encouraging 5 to 1,000 square foot lots, the math again comes to 7 to 9, not 14. This would be—
Chairman, that is 3 minutes.
Okay.
Did you sign up?
Yes.
Okay, so how many people in the room wish to donate their 3 minutes?
I'm almost done. This should be the last one. Thank you.
State your name and time.
Okay, awesome. This would be the average 35 square foot lot average. This does not include the road or the open space. So the actual lots that the homes and the parking are on are much, much smaller. Again, this is misleading information. It says less. Does less mean half? I'm not sure. The staff reports note seamless transition as listed above. In no way does this follow a written intention of the CA2. The staff report is downright false based on the fact on how the comp plan is currently written. And when the staff mentions a feel, that does not count as a fact. Again, CA2 is 62% of this landmass. Goal H-1 housing, policy A, encourage diversity in housing as appropriate in land use designations. Again, this is not appropriate for the CA2 designation. Policy D, ensuring that the bulk, mass, or scale of individual development does not dominate the street. This would absolutely dominate the street. And I've ridden my bicycle down Main Street for the last 12 years, and that corner is not the place for this development. It's a great place for 4 single-family dwellings. So I respectfully ask for you guys to turn this application down. Do you have any questions for me? I read it all.
Did very well, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have anyone else who would like to testify in opposition? Or are you going to call them off?
Leanna Nixon.
All right, hello. My name is Leanna Nixon, and I first want to say that I second everything that Taylor Bradish just said. Thank you, Taylor. And my husband and I live at 1813 Main Street. We do not support the proposed development. We live in a single-story home, and the proposed development would border 50% of our property line. So it's the red, you can see it, yeah, right there. The development infringes on our rights as adjacent property owners, and we are not supportive for these reasons. 1, all the homes that are actually adjacent to the proposed development are 1 story, as we talked about. The developer is using homes across the street and other areas that are not defined as adjacent to justify building their 2-story structures. 2, the proposed 4-unit structure that would border our property line, so the 4 with the 5-foot setback, to me, there's no question that that's a rear yard setback. That's not a side yard, and that would require 15 feet per code. It's only 5 feet. That's not enough space. Not only that, but there's no room for any kind of privacy landscaping at all. We feel like our privacy is going to be completely demolished by this. 3, finally, the city does not need to grant the conditional permit to combine these lots. 13 units is far too dense for this neighborhood to support. Similar size lots on Main Street include 2 to 3 multifamily units with a single driveway. As a personal side note, I'm pregnant and expecting in June. We bought this home in one of the oldest neighborhoods in Sandpoint because it's a quiet and peaceful place to raise a family. This development could house 50 plus people. Noise will increase, traffic will increase. The roads aren't even wide enough for cars to park on. This development will drastically change the look and feel of the neighborhood and will be detrimental to the quiet enjoyment of all the existing neighbors. I just don't think it makes sense to put this development here. As residents of Sandpoint, we understand the city needs more housing to support our workers, but not at the cost of ignoring or misinterpreting city code. This is an opportunity for the committee to set the right precedent and to protect existing property owners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, your house was the center square there?
Yes, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Melissa, who else do we have?
Stan Pardee.
Be nice to have a clock. How fast you're on.
I could let you know when you're at
You're
2 minutes and 1.
2-minute warning would be good. Okay, I agree with everything that's been said. And I would like to emphasize the condition use criteria number 3 of being harmonious, that there's no way this is harmonious in that neighborhood at all. And oh, by the way, I am a resident and I live nearby. Having a 2-story building, right, basically in your backyard, 5 feet from your line, I would agree that the setbacks, those are not side setbacks at all. I don't get that. My other issues are, of course, increased traffic. You're adding, most families have 2 cars. So you're adding 26 cars, and Main Street is narrow, has no shoulders. Anybody that parks out there creates a 1-lane road instantly. I also worry about noise, and there's no doubt, absolutely, it's not even arguable, this will reduce the property value of the homes nearby. Putting this, it feels like it's being rammed into the neighborhood. It's just being shoe spooned in to someplace where it really doesn't belong. The majority of the houses are single family with a few duplexes. And also, if you look at the thing, it's almost like 90% hard surface, okay? And that means water runoff. And all the water for that whole neighborhood runs through my backyard, the whole thing. So it's gonna create, it has no place for water to percolate into the ground at all. What else?
You have about 1.5 minutes, Stan.
Okay, so to say I'm adamantly opposed to this is an understatement. I've worked 45 years to own a house, and I don't want to see its property values thrown in the toilet. It will decrease the property values, and at the same time, I'll probably end up paying the same taxes because the city won't recognize that my property value has gone down until maybe it's sold down the road. I also worry about, single family homes go up pretty fast. This is going to be a long construction project, which means I'm going to listen to construction noise for months on end, including possibly loud construction radios that they do all the time. They got blare those suckers up all day long for months, listen to this thing go up. Anyway, that's it for me.
Stan, where is your property?
Poplar Street, 1812 Poplar. Right now I can look out my back window and I can see trees and stuff. This is going to be up in my view, looking across my back fence. There's one lot between myself and them.
Can we pull up his property? Because you mentioned the runoff. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Was it on that map?
No, it's not on that map.
Gotcha.
It's south, one lot over south. I'm on Poplar, and so I would be looking back across, seeing this 2-story building in my view. It's on Poplar. right there. There's nothing on the corner. Nope. Yeah, right there. That's that one.
Okay. Gotcha.
Anything more?
No.
Melissa, do we have others?
Mr. Vice Chair, no one else has signed up.
Okay. Oh.
My name is Tracy Bitus, and I live directly across the street from the 5-unit. If you could put that back up.
There.
Yes, okay. We're at 1804 Main Street. And I also agree with the previous speakers and the just pointing out that the parking is already bad. If anyone had people over, there was literally no place for them to park. There's no place for them to go for a walk. There's no place for snow or the trash or any of that type of stuff. And also, I believe it would also bring down property values. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it for people that are signed up?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
Is there anyone else here who would like to testify in favor or anyone who would like to testify neutral? Or anyone else who would like to testify opposed? Do commissioners have any additional questions for anybody at this time? Okay. Public hearing is still open. We haven't closed that part of it yet.
So there was a lot of comments in there from the audience about the integrity of the development. And I wanted to know if city staff could answer some of those questions. I think it was, I forgot. It was James first? No, it wasn't. Taylor, I'm sorry. But, you know, there's some questions about whether the design fits the property along with the property line and the side. So I'm just concerned that if staff was able to answer any of those or wanted to, if they could now.
So I think with all due respect, it might be best to ask for a rebuttal from the applicant at this point while the public hearing is open. We can finish the public hearing and then you can proceed with any staff questions at that point.
Okay, I'll wait till then.
Okay, then before the hearing is closed, would the applicant care to offer any rebuttal testimony? Just a reminder that if any new facts are elicited during rebuttal, the public must be given an opportunity to comment on any new facts. Okay, then the public hearing is closed now. And at this time, the commission will deliberate. No new information may be provided. Any questions may be directed only to city staff during deliberations. The staff report does include suggested motions.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
Point of order. May I ask those who have their microphones up to pull those down as we start deliberation, just so we can catch that for the record, please?
Talking to you, Forrest. I said she's no. All right.
Pull your mic down so she can hear you.
There we go.
Thank you.
Not speaking anyway. Feel like I'm on the spot.
That's assuming you have anything to say.
All right.
Camp, now is a good time to ask.
Yes.
Okay, so back to my out of time question. Concerns about integrity of the design, how it fits the property. Earlier statements that when I asked applicant if it fit the city criteria and code. So is it the staff's opinion that this design fits the code and all ordinances?
Mr. Chairman, if I might chime in at this point.
Please.
Thank you. For the record, Darren Fluke, I'm the interim city planner on Zoom today. Just to set context for you and how we view and evaluate an application like this. we start with the base zoning designation, which in this case is the RM zoning designation, residential multifamily. That zone is established to accommodate multifamily units. Within any zoning designation, you typically have uses divided between what we would consider principal permitted uses. In a single family zone, for instance, a principal permitted use is a single family dwelling. In a residential multifamily zone, a principal permitted use is a multifamily dwelling. In the case of the Sandpoint City Code, what it says is that multifamily projects that are greater than 7 units constitute a conditional use. So a conditional use is a level higher of scrutiny, if you will, than a principal permitted use. And what the idea of a conditional use is that it is probably a use that fits with the zone, with the principal permitted uses that are allowed in the zone, typically with the imposition of conditions that would work to mitigate any adverse impacts of the land use on surrounding properties. So in this case, what you're faced with is looking at a project of 13 units. So that meets the threshold of a conditional use. And your charge is to say, well, the base zoning designation of residential multifamily does allow for this density, but it does say that the commission should use their judgment to impose conditions that help it to be more copacetic, if you will, with what's already developed in the neighborhood. With regard to the question of setbacks, just the configuration of the property itself makes imposition of strict setbacks problematic, if you will, just because of the frontage on Main Street and the frontage on Lincoln. If we had a perfect code, it would probably address these issues a little bit differently, but we don't, and we never have a perfect code. And so that's where the commission is sort of directed to use your judgment to impose conditions that help this land use fit in with the land uses around it. So it is difficult for you to look at an L-shaped property and determine which, if any, of the property lines is a rear setback versus a front setback versus a side setback. But in the final analysis, you have the ability to impose conditions of approval that make this land use more conforming with what's going on around it. And so I think in direct answer to your question, that's a lot of words, and I hope you don't think I'm trying to talk around your question, because I'm not. In our view, this does meet the standards of the residential multifamily zone with the imposition of conditions. And so all of these properties that you're looking at tonight are all zoned RM, and there may come a time when they redevelop or they're proposed for redevelopment, and your charge then will be the same as it is tonight, which is to impose conditions that help make the proposed land use compatible with what's going on around it.
Thank you. I appreciate your clarification.
John, may I ask a question of Darren?
Mm-hmm.
Darren, could you comment on the fact that a portion of this property is CA2 under the comp plan as a portion is CA3? Is that significant in your mind as the city planner?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, not necessarily, because again, the base zoning designation for the entire property, the entire 1.14 acres, is residential multifamily. And so that the zoning code is the standard that establishes the law, the shalls. The comprehensive plan is a should sort of scenario, and the boundaries that are drawn on a map within a comprehensive plan are really considered more fuzzy, if you will, than like the bright lines that are drawn on a zoning map. And so anytime we draw a boundary, it does, it creates a situation where one side's in and one side's out. And with regard to the comp plan, it's just not, reasonable to assume that those lines are bright lines, especially when the underlying zoning designation is the multifamily zone.
Thank you.
Darren, related to that, perhaps, is it the comp plan or the actual zoning that suggests that adjacent properties, and I don't even want to get into what's adjacent yet, but adjacent properties should increase height by only half a story? I remember that as being part of the comp plan. I can't remember whether it's written into code.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that is part of the zoning ordinance. And it does come from the multifamily section of the code. And the intent of that section is to, again, get a form of development that is, reasonably similar to what's around it. And so that is, I guess, the question in front of the commission is, does this fit the context of the neighborhood, the buildings that are proposed? Typically, the way it would be handled is that the buildings, step down a certain bit so that the second story might be pulled back from the property line a little further, rather than being a full, 2-story wall right on a property line. But that is a, in the final analysis, that's a judgment that the commission needs to make as they evaluate the site plan and in the context of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
I have a question too that was from information brought up during testimony, public testimony. And I don't know the numbers, I didn't crunch them on this, but on a multifamily development like this, the percentage of impervious surfaces that are allowed was the 90% figure that was given, an accurate figure. Can city staff adjust that, and what would be the code for that on a multifamily unit like this?
Mr. Chairman, it's not. Those calculations were done and provided on the site plan. If memory serves, we're allowed an 80% impervious surface on the entirety of the lot. And we came in somewhere south of that. I think, Tess, if you could show the site plan, that might be shown on the top of the site plan, if I remember right. Nope, not on that one. Let me see if I can find it real quick while we're talking so I can give you the exact numbers.
So the standard for multifamily like this is 80%.
40% building and 40% other impervious, if memory serves.
I think it's 30%. Excuse me, I'm looking at it on page 13 of the staff report, I believe. There's a table there. Indicates the building can cover 30% and 40% can be impervious. Oh, wait, well, that's, no, I'm confused by this table then, because
what's on the left is required, what's on the right is what's being provided.
Okay, so what's on the left is what is required and what is on the right is being provided. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, that would seem to be within requirements.
And bear with me, commissioners, I am just pulling it up now. So the combined lot size is 48,646 square feet. 40% building area would allow 19,458 square feet. And we're coming in at, with what's proposed, at 14,678. And then the impervious area, again, would allow 19,458, and we're coming in at 19,458. So it's coming in just under the 80% allowable.
And what does the plan indicate what will be done with stormwater?
Commissioner, One of the conditions of approval requires the stormwater management plan be designed and approved prior to construction. And so what the Sandpoint ordinance requires is that all stormwater generated on site be retained on site. So there will not be any drainage allowed to leave the site.
To other properties.
Correct.
Okay.
Darren, is the allowable height 40 feet?
In the RM zone?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I believe that's correct. Let me just, that is correct. 40 feet, yes. And so again, you get what the zoning standard is and what fits the neighborhood might not be exactly the same thing. And that's where the commission, should bring their judgment to bear on what's being proposed. And these structures are well under the 40-foot height allowed in the zone, but yet taller than some of the adjoining buildings.
Commissioners, do we have further questions or further deliberations amongst ourselves?
I don't have further questions.
I know a concern I have is the use of the driveway, which certainly has all the appearances of a street. And when people park on that, I think it would definitely compromise public safety because people will park on it.
Where are we at in terms of the hearing? Is the hearing closed yet? Or
The public hearing is closed.
Okay.
Yes, we're deliberations
So
now. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
We're deliberating until someone makes a motion.
Got it.
That's my take on it, at least.
So John, you were saying you have a concern with the
driveway? The driveway, which has all the appearances of a road.
Can we see the driveway again, please?
We want to see it because my point being is that driveway is not a typical driveway. It's bigger than a driveway, and that's public safety so that fire trucks can get in and out. And people will be allowed to park on that because it's a private driveway. And that, how would they not be able to if it's a private driveway?
It'll be signed. Our fire code actually requires it's a fire access that it's no parking sign.
That eliminates one of my major concerns.
Yes. So those are parking stalls that, but I
gotcha.
It's very similar to other multifamily developments that have a parking facility and they have drive aisles that go through them.
The drive aisles are signed, yes. No parking. And I would imagine that the proposed developers would also have no through traffic signs or something too, because it looks like a shortcut.
So Darren or Amanda, if these were left as 4 separate lots zoned multifamily, could this developer build a duplex or triplex on each of the 4?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes, they could. It's a little bit more complicated than that because the 3 lots that adjoin Lincoln were platted. Somehow the plat was approved without frontage on the back 2 lots. So those lots do not have frontage on Lincoln Street. We've had a considerable back and forth with previous landowner about that condition. But technically, yes, the RM zone would allow for duplexes or triplexes on either one of those lots.
But then there would not be access to them. Is that the problem?
That's correct. So the 2 interior lots would not be served by an actual public frontage, and therefore the 2 interior lots have been determined to be non-buildable, currently configured. But Darren is absolutely spot on that by zoning, a duplex would be allowed in that location.
So, and when you say the interior lots have been determined to be non-buildable, does that mean one cannot legally build there, or one?
That's what that means, correct.
Okay.
They have to be combined into a single lot that has frontage on Lincoln.
And then if it were a single lot, how many units could you build on it?
If the 3 lots were combined, just the 3 instead of the 4?
Yeah.
That would take some math.
Sorry, I'm trying. I understand it's just a thorny question because we need the housing, and I appreciate the desire of the builders to provide it. And I'm frustrated with zoning problems left over from the past that we've run into before, but I guess we have to solve them one time or another. But I don't see this project as fitting into the scale of the neighborhood. And I think to call what is essentially a rear setback a side setback it's just, it's technically correct, but does not accurately reflect reality. And I can understand the frustration of the people who live there now being faced with a 2-story wall 5 feet from their back fence. I guess I'm just trying to see whether there's any other way that this set of lots could be used for multifamily housing, or maybe more units could be provided without using up so much room for a street. But I know that reinventing the project is not within the scope of the commission's purview at the moment. But for me, I have to say right now, as designed, it doesn't fit the requirements of it. It is so out of line with what is already there that I would be inclined to vote against it.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, just for context, I did a little quick math here, which is always a dangerous thing to do in the middle of a public hearing. But just so you know that the 3 lots that adjoin Lincoln comprise 0.63 acres, which is a little over 27,000 square feet. And by code, you need only 20,975 square feet to get 10 units. So actually those 3 lots that abut Lincoln Street, were they combined into a single parcel, would accommodate on the order of 11 or 12 units as they are now.
And so it would be, legally, it would be allowable to be even denser than what is being suggested here. Is that what you're saying, Darren?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, that's accurate, yes.
Okay.
This is not achieving anywhere near the density that is allowed in the RM zone.
Okay.
They would still have the same difficulty with access, though, right? Because of the shape of the lot.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, if you were to combine the 3 lots that are on Lincoln into a single lot, what they would do is share a single approach to Lincoln Street, and presumably, some sort of a single building, likely with a single approach and parking area.
Do we have further deliberation or a motion? Before I were to do that, I guess there's one point I would make too, and we've mostly focused on the, for practical purposes, what is the backyard of the 4 units in the middle. By definition, perhaps a side yard. We haven't looked too much at the lots to the east because they are currently sitting, and the proposed conditions do not address that side yard / backyard, which is currently sitting at 5 feet. Because that would be another potential. That line right there is currently at a 5-foot setback. to the existing neighborhood.
Mr. Chairman, commissioners, if I could just amend my statement, I was looking purely at the land area that you're seeing there. There is a restriction regarding frontage as well, which requires 125 feet of frontage. So those 3 lots combined would only accommodate 8 units and not the 11 that I previously mentioned.
Anyone ready to make a motion?
I just want to speak on a couple of things. Going back to a topic that I love is the grid street pattern, which I believe this, even though it's not a street, it does look like a street from a certain view. And it is a grid pattern, which I appreciate. I know we've had, in the last year, we've had projects that were very similar to this. And there was concern about the adjacent buildings being too high. That's probably my only concern, is that code does say that, which I think is kind of strange, but because I don't know how you really go to a half a story feasibly, but going from 1 to 2, I don't know. This is where I get hung up with, property rights and code, and then neighboring properties. It's tough to make a decision one way or another. But to me, that's the closest thing I see as being an issue, is that especially on the middle fourplex with currently at the 5-foot setback, that's the closest issue I see, is that it goes from 1 to 2 stories. So I think there needs to be something done there. The rest of it, I think, is fine. I don't think changing that setback from 5 to 15 there accomplishes the goal. I think somehow stepping that structure from a 2 to a 1.5 to a 2. And I know that's been done in the past. That's not up to me to decide, though. We talk about affordable housing and all that, like that's out of our, we don't have much control over that. And I do think these will be desirable units. I think it does accomplish putting a little more density in an area that, frankly, I think can use it, because once again, I lived in that neighborhood for several years, and it's a nice neighborhood, but there is room to expand there. The 3 lots at one time were 1 lot, and then somehow it got changed into 3, which was really weird. But I think the goal with that project was to do something like this too. But I don't like double fronting lots, but I don't see this as being a double fronting lot, because it doesn't have a road on each side of 1 lot. It has 2 accesses, which frankly, I think make this, it's one of the things I do like about this. The private public street thing, I don't see an issue there. I think in the vicinity, which in my mind, the vicinity is 4 or 5 blocks away, I think there's projects that look very, very similar to this, with nearly the same private street access situation. So I'm in favor with a condition with something with the middle structure having a stepped story, but I don't believe if you make that a 15-foot setback for that structure, then it squeezes it down considerably. That's 10 feet. So I think the half story or however that could be accomplished would be my input.
And that could be a condition that we would put on it, that it be stepped up.
On all four, or?
Well, I think it has to be, doesn't it?
Well, it can, but the condition can be whatever you want it to be. If you wanted to just do one, or you wanted to go 4, 3 and step to the next 4.
Well, I'm thinking just the
inner 4.
Yeah, the inner 4, that side, backyard, whatever. Let's just say that's the
north
backyard.
side. The north
side of that structure should have a step. But I don't believe. I believe that with the 15-foot setback on the structure to the west, that's a concession because it's on the street. And that's, to me, that's more of a side yard than it is a backyard, because it is fronting the street, even though the structure doesn't front the street. I don't know if we could ever make that perfect, you know.
It's a tough lot to build on, that's for sure.
But how do you, listening to what is allowable on this parcel, potential parcel, and what we have here, there could be a lot better plan. I don't know. I can't find much of a better one in my mind that accomplishes what is allowable, what takes care of property rights, what takes care of, you know, the zoning, which is higher density. I think the project could look a whole lot worse. I think under the code, there could be a lot more done there that's totally legal that would look, that nobody would like. So I'm in favor with that condition.
Well, I think we just need to clarify the condition if it's all 4 at 1 story, or if we want to look at the drawing again, so get a perspective. So that's what the proposed condition is.
That would be mine, yeah.
Right now, the proposed condition as it is that the north property line on 8 units would be 15 feet. That's not what is shown in the diagrams. That is one of the proposed conditions. There isn't a similar condition for the east side of the property, which is a condition I would certainly entertain. Then the other thing is if we wanted the condition that there be a step up from 1 story to 1.5 stories to 2 stories. Well, there wouldn't be a 1 story, it'd be 1.5 stories to 2 stories. We can do that, and then it would fall upon the builders if they could find a way to make that economical or not.
Those seem reasonable conditions to me. That makes me more inclined to vote for it.
Mr. Vice Chair, may I make a comment just for point of clarity?
Absolutely.
So from a 1.5 story perspective, I realize this is a bit of semantics.
Right.
But it would technically be the appearance of 1.5 stories. There is technically not a such thing as 1.5 stories. By building code, that's not allowed. That was sort of the analysis in the staff report. So there's fundamentally 2 ways to achieve 1.5 stories for the most part, and that would be to have half of a basement recessed or to have a split level design, right? So you walk up and have your stories halfway through the structure. Just keeping that in mind.
So that's different from prior projects that we had talked about where there actually was a step up.
Correct, and those were full stories.
Correct, yeah.
So it was
I understand.
stepping back.
That's the difference, yes.
Those were still 2-story
that
structures.
was a 2 to a 3.
So Amanda, do you understand what we're looking for, and could you suggest language that would achieve it?
Thank you, Commissioner. I would actually defer back to Darren and see if he has a suggestion on the step back. I do understand your intent, and I think Darren might have some ideas there.
Let me get unmuted there. The way I would suggest if you were going to require such thing would be to require that any 2nd story structure be set back 15 feet from the property line. That would allow the single story structure as drawn to, to be where it is. And then the higher portion of the building would step back. Does that make sense?
No, because I thought it was already 15 feet, except in the places where it's 5 feet. So if you require the second story structure to be set back 15 feet, then that's further for the portions of the building that are 5 feet, have only a 5-foot setback, but it doesn't I guess we were talking about a 15-foot setback all the way around, and then maybe it makes sense to say 25 feet for the second story.
Okay, that Commissioner, that's different than what I was hearing. I was hearing that you wanted the second story to set back, and you can articulate the structure in a way that the single story, extends out further than the second story.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the entire structure is built as 2 stories, whereas you could have the second story set back and allow the first story to encroach further. I mean, the commission just has to define what those dimensions are that they think make this compatible. So if it's 25 feet, that's going to change things significantly for the buildings, obviously.
Right. So, John, just help me figure out where we're at. I thought we talked about a 15-foot setback from the property line on both the north, all the units, as well as on the east. Did I miss something there?
If we were to have a motion for approval with the conditions the city has put in there, the city staff has put in there, it would only be on the north side of the 15-foot setback would only be on the north side of the 2-4 units, and it would not be on the east side of the 5-unit building. That's still at a 5-foot, but that could be another condition that also gets the 15-foot. So that would essentially saying anywhere where there is a building adjacent to existing homes, that it would be a 15-foot setback, regardless if we call it a side or a backyard.
But adjacent to the east was 1.5 stories, wasn't it? That's what.
Well, I'm not talking about the size of the buildings. I'm just talking about the setbacks.
Yeah.
So that that's a different part of code, that there be a backyard. Mm-hmm. And right now we're saying that's not a backyard, it's a side yard. Mm-hmm. A condition to make it functionally a backyard would mean we want that to be 15 feet as well.
That's not the way that I understood it. So I'll take a try at this. It sounded like the suggestion for the 5 on the side stays, but the building itself, as you get to the top of the wall, it's 1 story and it tapers into a second, is the way that I understand it.
So Slate, so are you saying there's a 5-foot setback?
On there's a 5 on the side, and I think what Commissioner Dunkel was describing was that the side structure would come up, the normal 9-10 feet, whatever the wall is, and then it would only be 1 story, probably with a peaked roof, and it would run and stay 10 feet, hypothetically, and then the second story starts. Is the way I understand it. I just need confirmation that I'm describing that right.
For the east property line.
For the subject with the 5-foot sidewall.
Commissioners, the way the condition is written right now, it just says the building be set back 15 feet. What I was suggesting was that you could instead require articulation of the second story instead of making the entire building set back 15 feet. But the way the condition is written right now, it just says that the buildings that abut that north property line must be set back 15 feet. The building on the far west meets that. The building in the center does not. And so that would take some redesign on the applicant's part to meet that condition.
And then the other condition that I was interested in was the same 15-foot setback on the 5-plex on the east property line there, because right now that's sitting 5 feet on somebody else's property. I mean, not on their property, 5 feet from their property, but it's that close to the property. Let me just ask kind of a broad question here for all the commissioners. If those kinds of conditions were put in and we can get the verbiage established, do you think it still meets some of Commissioner Husman's concerns about whether or not this is harmonious with the existing neighborhood and whether or not this is disturbing?
Well, let me just give you my 2 cents worth. I think this is a difficult one because, you know, it's an infill project. It's in a long time established neighborhood. It's an odd shaped property. It's difficult to develop. But when you really drill down, I think the bottom line for me is it is zoned multifamily. This project does not maximize the density that could be built under multifamily. I'm just always hesitant myself to get into micromanaging the design of the buildings and the like. I'm to the point of being comfortable with approving the project as proposed. That's my 2 cents worth. Not a motion. That's
Correct.
just my thoughts.
If I may.
Yeah.
Also not a motion. My opinion is that it's not a great fit for the neighborhood as it exists today, but that whole end of the world is zoned multi-use residential. That is the path of progress that we see and that we need. And it's the way it's going to go. If things keep going the way they're going, people are going to be snapping up all the MUR and building multis on it. And like it or not, today, it is currently legal. It is, as you say, a really an inventive and useful use of those otherwise unbuildable and difficult lots, regardless of what we think of the height and, again, the fit in the neighborhood, which I don't like much. But it is the way it's going to go. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And I think I do like the step back of the second story on the 4 buildings to the center where it's closer to the property line, 5-foot setback on that one multi-unit piece. I think the rest of it, in my mind, will fly. I like it.
Let me say the first condition proposed by city staff is that will not be a 5-foot setback. It will be a 15-foot setback.
I think that'll impact the structure too much. As he says, it'll take away the parking or it'll take away too much of the square footage to make it economically feasible. I don't know what the difference would be to step the front, the top sections, next floor up, back 10 feet to accommodate a 15-foot setback from the actual property line. I do understand that the bottom floor would be up to the 5 feet and it would allow for parking off the road, and the residential component on the upper floor would be somewhat less. I don't know if that's a deal killer or not, but I can see that happening, and it would allow for a little more light and space. Not a lot, but a little. It would mitigate the impact of that otherwise fairly blocky structure. That's all I got.
I agree. How do we word it to where, I agree with what Forrest said, how do we word it to keep the middle structure at the 5-foot setback, but also have it the second story step back 10 feet?
We would add just that specification, that structure the second story shall have a 15-foot setback.
Okay. Then the rest of it I like. I don't think personally I think the 5 foot on the on the east line is fine. It hasn't seemed to be any complaints about that. And to me that seems like it is a side yard, regardless of how the structure sits on it. It's a side yard. It's a side yard, I think.
I would still like a step back on the second story, even for the buildings that have a 15-foot setback. Just because having that 2-story wall next to your backyard, an unbroken 2-story wall, is disturbing. And I agree with Forrest that this is disturbing. It's not the same as what's there, but it is leading to what will be there. I just wish we could do a little more to mitigate its effects on the neighbors.
I see that we're doing a little editing here. That's good. Could we, for purpose of discussion, the one fronting Lincoln, call it building 1, the one in the middle, building 2, and the one closest to Main, building 3, so that we all know we're talking about the same stuff as we propose conditions? Is that reasonable? It's not legal. I mean, it's not a legal description.
Yeah.
But it makes it easier for us to contemplate what it is we're talking about. So
westernmost fourplex would be building 1.
So building 1 currently has a 15-foot setback. Kate, are you saying you still would like to see the second story even on that one?
Yeah, I would prefer it. And maybe a 5-foot step back would make the structure more feasible, but anything to break up that 2-story blank wall next to the backyard, I would love to do something. Maybe that's more than we can do.
Well, I mean, we can make that a condition, and then it's up to the developer to see whether or not that is economically feasible for him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I just don't know enough to have a good idea of whether it is.
Commissioners, what are your thoughts as far as changing? Is this actually, this is the first condition, yeah, proposed by the city. So we're talking the second story. Well, I mean, I know what you're saying. Commissioners, tell me what you think. Do we want the second story of that? Or should we make a motion first and then amend the conditions as we go forward? No, try and get it hammered out now. Thank you.
I have one question. If we move to approve as presented, they would all have 15-foot set?
Yes.
Even on the east?
Not in the east.
Okay.
Not in the east.
All right.
As written, it doesn't.
Okay.
But both buildings 1 and 2 would have 15 as written. Building 3 would not.
And building 2 wouldn't have parking. If you accept it as it's presented.
Yeah.
Building 2 wouldn't have parking with a 15-foot setback. Is that what you were saying? I just want to make sure the record's really clear on what your comment is.
Yeah.
It would, I mean, they would have to find a way to make that happen because there would have to be parking. So they'd have to change the structure of the building. The square footage of the building would change.
Commissioners, that's correct. The parking would be required. So although that's technically a solution, it's not feasible in this case. It would have the structure is going to have to get smaller, period.
Yeah. And per city suggested conditions, that is what would happen. The building would have to get smaller.
Can we ask the square footage of the building as it currently is?
I believe it was 1,300 and 1,800. I can go back through and check.
So, those are the 13s.
You can't have.
Those are the 13s.
Yeah.
They're the smaller ones. Yeah.
Okay. Those are the 13s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we need to decide is, do we want, well, do we want 15-foot setbacks everywhere or not? Not.
I'm not in favor of that.
Okay. Do we want the second stories to be set back 15 feet?
I would.
Which would be on both unit, the way I'm referring to them, that'd be on both building 2 and building 3, but not building 1. Because it's already 15 feet back.
10 feet would be sufficient additional step back for the second story.
For a total of 15 from the property.
Yeah.
On building 2.
Building 2, correct. That's the way I understand.
Right, on building 2, what Kate is referring to is building 1. On building 1, can it be 2 stories 15 feet from the property line?
Yeah, what I'm saying is where there's a 15-foot setback, we'll let it go to 2 stories blank wall. But where there is only a 5-foot setback, we will ask for a 10-foot step back of the second story.
Correct. On both the north and east property lines.
Where there are the 5-foot setbacks.
Correct. Is that where we're at?
Not the east. I didn't understand it as being the east. I thought.
Well, I'm
building 1
just asking.
Or building, that's building 3.
Right. That'd be building 3.
Yeah, I want it on the east too, Slate.
I would like it on the east as well. But
does that mean that building 1 could have a 5-foot setback and do the same thing? Are we saying that?
If the applicant chose, yes.
So are you okay with that, Kate?
Yeah. Fork.
You're ready for a motion.
I agree.
Well, we are as soon as we get condition number 1 nailed down.
You just say with direction to city staff to make the condition consistent with what was just discussed as the amendment, the 10-foot setback. If it's a 5-foot setback, then they do a 10-foot setback on an additional 10 feet on the second story.
On all buildings.
That's what I just heard Commissioner Huesman, but I don't have a motion pending.
Well, yeah, that's just for the condition.
Yeah.
That seems to be the.
I want to keep the 15-foot setback where there's room for it, but I just think that's getting maybe a setback too far at this point. So I could move that we just add the condition that where there is a 5-foot setback, there must also be a 10-foot step back of the second story.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. And that would actually give the developer some flexibility. They could do a 15-foot setback and go 2 stories, or they would go 5 foot and then another 10 for the second story.
Yeah, I'm afraid that may be the best we can do.
Okay, I'm ready. I move the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission, after consideration of the criteria and relevant standards of Idaho Code and Sandpoint City Code, approve the request by ZDP Lincoln LLC for a conditional use permit to allow for the proposed 13-unit multifamily development in the residential multifamily zone on parcels listed in this. Can I do that?
Application.
Listed in this application, located at 624, 626, 628 North Lincoln and 1808 Main Street, Sandpoint, Idaho, subject to the following conditions listed in the staff report. Correct?
And as amended
this evening. And as amended.
As amended this evening.
Amended this evening.
To be a first story 5 feet from the property line and a second story 15 feet from the property line.
As John said. Do I have to do the rest?
Yes.
Okay. Based on evidence, records, and testimony, the reasons for approving this request are: staff has followed the notice procedures applicable to conditional use permits contained in Idaho Code 67-6512 and Sandpoint City Code Title 9, Chapter 9. The proposed use is listed in the Sandpoint Code as conditional use. The proposed use is not a conflict with the comprehensive plan, and a conditional use application and associated fees have been submitted containing the requirements of city code and demonstrated compliance with all 9 criteria for conditional use permits as outlined in Sandpoint City Code 9-9-6A3H.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Melissa, do you want to do a roll call?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just another point of clarification.
Okay.
Both the agenda and the staff report and the suggested motion do indicate that that is 1809 Main Street.
Oh, okay. So the 18.
I said 1809.
Well, yeah, 1809 is correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Or 1308 was the previous.
There we go. The other one was the one.
Correction.
Okay. So we have the correct addresses now. We're all legal. Okay.
Commissioner Dunkel?
Yes.
Commissioner Schuck?
Aye.
Commissioner Camp?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
I'm going to go no.
Commissioner Riggs?
No, I with the comment that I would have approved the project as proposed by the applicant, but no on the motion.
Commissioner Huseman?
Yes.
So the motion passes. With no further business before the commission, this meeting is now adjourned at, where's the clock?
7:50.
Gotcha.